Likewise, Senator Bozeman asked a question about rural broadband. I want to focus on the Universal Service Fund and the circumstance we find ourselves in. First of all, I'm pleased to see that we're moving in a correction toward the order that was entered prior to your arrival, Mr. Chairman, and your visit with me at the time of your confirmation. You committed to reforming the reforms, and I'd like to see that to continue expeditiously with a great deal of common sense and a sensitivity toward how rural the country is and how small many of those providers are. One of the things that I'd like to ask about this morning, though, is the Universal Service Fund. In so many instances, the landline is no longer the desired option by the customer. And yet the Universal Service Fund collects money on that service, but we need that money to be used to deploy broadband in rural America. What is the plan to transition the Universal Service Fund phone support to help support broadband so that rural customers can access that broadband at comparable and affordable rates as urban areas?
Thank you, Senator. First of all, I want you to know that I will continue to live up to that commitment to you. I think we did, I came right in and said this QRA stuff, which you and I had a long discussion about, is ridiculous and it's gone.
Thank you.
And as I said earlier, we're in the process of looking at just how do we put together a rate of return package. I agree that it doesn't make much sense to have the linkage between narrowband and broadband. And I know Commissioner Pai and I are in violent agreement on that point.
Nice to see.
The difficulty is it's harder than just cutting the cord here, because we need to make sure that we are not just supporting existing broadband, but we're also providing funds to the non-served areas. And how we get that right is essentially what we're going through right now. But we need to cover more of rural America, and we will do that, and we're doing it in this order. In the other order that the Commissioner Pai and I both just voted favorably for a couple of months ago, and we just actually took the action a couple of weeks ago, we've released $10 billion to be spent over the next 6 years by 6 companies in the price cap carrier arrangement. And then we've put in behind that a structure that says that those areas they're not going to serve, we're going to auction off. We're going to put auctions back to work to say, okay, who wants to serve this area and what will it cost to serve it? So one of the things that we're going through is we're going through both changing the existing models that people are used to working with. And the problem is, as I said before, that's a gazintas and gazatas that affects companies, but also changing the overall construct and saying it's not just your father's USF program anymore. We want to look at bringing new people in. We want to look at having markets decide things by auction. And that's what we're committed to doing.
If the industry could come up with a plan to present to you, is there a way that that would be considered within the FCC?
Yes, sir. And that was essentially what we were saying when the 3 commissioners' offices got together with them and said, hey, can you come? Where you stand depends on where you sit, sir, and we have to make sure that everybody understands they're sitting in the same place.
How long do you see a transition taking?
A transition to
that form of broadband support?
I hope that we can have the plans in place this year.
Okay. Commissioner Pai, anything you'd like to respond to the questions I asked the chairman?
Sure, if I could just build on briefly to the chairman's answer with respect to the mechanism for supporting standalone broadband. This is something we had long had a colloquy about. We've seen it for ourselves in Kansas. The need is acute, and we need to get this done. And I joined the chairman in both my commitment to getting it done and committed to finishing the project by the end of the year. This is part of the reason why I proposed standalone support for standalone broadband a couple of years ago, because these carriers are in a Hobson's choice. Either they go it alone with standalone broadband without USF funds, or they risk losing the customers. So I think that we do, and I'm glad that on a bipartisan basis, we teed up a lot of these issues, including how the mechanisms should be structured, in a notice of proposed rulemaking last June. And we teed up a number of different other proposals in that same NPRM, as it's called. But I think we need to be clear. We don't need a second path for carriers. We don't need an elegant mathematical model. We don't need a follow-up to the QRA, which I'm grateful to the chairman for scrapping. What I'm increasingly optimistic about is that we can adopt targeted reforms to our rules, in particular, our Part 36 and Part 54 accounting rules. And that regulatory tweak, which we have all the legal authority in the world to do, I believe could help some rate of return carriers offer standalone broadband without effectively being penalized for it. And so those green shoots hopefully will blossom over the next couple of months. But again, I stand ready to work with the chairman, with our other colleagues, and of course with you to make sure that the mechanism is something that works for rural America.